Well, Ashley, a big difference between who investigators believe the East Area Rapist was as he was committing crimes terrorizing California from here in Northern California to Southern California. And here in this Citrus Heights neighborhood, this is a suburban community east of Sacramento. Neighbors are still in disbelief. They say it just doesn't match up because the man they knew, Joseph DeAngelo, who is now the suspected East Area Rapist, was a man who was helpful. They say he did yell from time to time, but he helped neighbors. For example, one neighbor needed to borrow a glass of milk. He brought them a gallon. He was helpful with cars. He was a mechanic. And so they are just in absolute disbelief. They also say that he was a very active man who was constantly working on his yard. His yard, which is just behind me, is kept meticulously. We're told he was constantly mowing his yard, working on his cars and his boats. And you talked about him in court. I was in the courtroom on Friday, and we saw a different picture. We saw an old man who was in a wheelchair looking pretty weak. He was struggling to keep his eyes open even. And when the judge spoke to him, he was delayed. It looked as though he didn't fully understand the judge. Whether or not there was something going on or he was putting that on is still unknown, but very different descriptions of the man who neighbors know here, who's suspected to be the East Area Rapist, and the man we saw in court, and the man who committed so many crimes across California 42 years ago.
Allie, it's so remarkable to see that.
Well, you know, if I didn't know the backstory and what we've heard so far through our reporting in Sacramento, I think I might have thought that he was a man who had some health problems. He is older. He's 72 years old. We don't know what he had experienced while he was put behind bars. A lot of that has been under wraps. But, you know, I would have believed it, but a lot of people are really questioning based on what the neighbors are telling us here in his community, saying that, you know, just days before he was taken into custody, he was out and about. He was an active man, as you said. And just a couple of minutes ago, I spoke to somebody who worked with Joseph DeAngelo. DeAngelo was a mechanic for many, many years in Roseville, which is near his home. And they say he was missing part of one of his fingers, and that he was somebody who never called in sick ever over the course of decades, and that he was extremely paranoid almost of getting in trouble at work. So that's another description of him that seems a little different.
They also gave you a strange description of his hand. Can you describe for me what they talked about with regard to his physical ailment?
Well, the coworker we spoke to says that he just told him that it was a Navy injury, that one of his fingers, part of one of his fingers was missing. And so he said that happened while he was in the Navy. And so we don't really know too much about that. But one thing that's significant about that is that in these crimes, the East Area Rapist was wearing gloves. So if it in fact was DeAngelo, it would be something that he would be hiding perhaps under gloves, because that would be something that the victims would notice and they would report to police, and that would be a telltale sign as to who their man was for all these years.
Allie, that is absolutely fascinating, because if it was a Navy injury, I
have not figured out where they got that DNA. I actually asked one of the lead investigators on this case, who's been working it for decades, or for a decade, and he said that he couldn't reveal that. So hopefully that's something we find out. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot more as this case progresses in court.
Allie, don't go anywhere. I want to